I've been very influenced by what the Buddhists say, that what we leave behind are our words, our thoughts, and our actions. I hope that the footprint I leave will be one of respect for the planet and love for others, not for their sake, but for my own growth. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Welcome to Footprints, a podcast of Sauti Africa. In Footprints, we sit with our elders to hear their stories and glean their wisdom, especially as they relate to service and leadership. As you can tell, this isn't your usual host, Jacqueline Asimwe. My name is Rachel, and I'm sitting in for Jacqueline today. Our guest came highly recommended to us by a friend. Her name is Mary Moran. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
I invite you to introduce yourself in any way that you see fit.
Well, as you said, my name is Mary, and the first thing I'd like to say is that I came out to Maryhill High School in Nyamitanga in 1963. And I taught in that school for, maybe 27 years or something. And apart from home economics, clothing and textiles, I taught music, I taught singing, I was in charge of the church choir, and we produced a few musical shows. And the reason I'm starting with that is because about, number of years ago, my vocal cords started shrinking. Mm-hmm. And a doctor told me I could have an operation, but I was too afraid to have people cutting my throat and expanding my vocal cords. So I decided to stay with the shaky result that you're hearing.
Yes.
And that others will hear. When I listen to myself, I really have to put my hands in my nose.
Oh, dear.
So that's why I started to explain my shaky voice. Mm-hmm. I'm 87 years old. My health is good. And I have been here for the last few months teaching master's students in psychology and, believe it or not, in African philosophy, traditional ways of dealing with sickness and unhealth.
Where have you been teaching this master's course?
In Mbarara, Nyamitanga, within the Archdiocese of Mbarara. And we have a counsellor training institute where we do diploma, bachelor's and master's in counselling psychology. And we really have a good syllabus.
Have you always been a teacher?
Yeah.
Was that your first, was that your intention to go into teaching or into the academic setting?
When I grew up, my mother was a teacher, and I said I would never become a teacher. But then somehow, when I was in my A-level year in Ireland, I decided to go to home economics. It was St. Catherine's College of Domestic Science in Dublin, Ireland. And actually, believe it or not, the reason I chose that was because I thought happy marriages depended on women who looked after the home properly,
yes,
fed their husbands properly. I'm sorry, but my mind about marriage has changed.
Yes.
All my brothers cook and clean, so I don't think it's my job to make man happy by cooking for him. And So, and then I became a nun, Catholic nun. I was a Catholic nun for, I don't know how many years, from 1960 to 1992, about 34 years.
Yeah.
And I was in the States studying and going through a lot of personal transformation and therapy. And during that process, I sort of grew with the help of counselors and therapists into a strong desire to not be bound by the rules and regulations and required behaviors of a nun. So I took a very difficult decision because I was at the age of retirement. I had no husband, no home, no property, no health insurance, no job. I'd finished my studies in the States, but I got help from people to, make the final decision. I've never regretted the time I spent in the community and the opportunities that I got to come to Africa. I sometimes think, supposing I hadn't become a nun, would I have stayed in Ireland? Would I have got married? Would my world consist of what you find in a little island in the Atlantic Ocean? Mm-hmm. So I did some of my studies in the UK, some in Belgium, some in Rome, some in East Africa, Kenya, and Uganda. And then I studied counseling and psychotherapy in California. And I also studied spirituality and theology in California. So I must say, life and God and the daughters of Mary and Joseph, with whom I was a member for so many years, I have all of these groups and gods to thank for very good education.
Yeah. So it seems to me that learning is something that not just teaching, but learning. Learning is a pursuit of yours.
I never stopped. When I finished my psychology studies, a lot of it was in Western psychology. Thank God they also introduced us to Eastern psychology. They're very ancient philosophies, and psychologies are, something we should all know. So I started studying Buddhist psychology in 1993 or 4, and I have never stopped because people call Buddhism religion, but it's really a psychology. They don't talk about a belief system. They talk about a practice, and they talk about personhood, who we are and how we grow and the conditions in which we grow. They talk about our cultural ancestors, our genetic ancestors, our spiritual ancestors. So when we're born, we don't just land and start living. We're coming in with millennia of culture, spirituality, genes, and our behavior stems from that. Not just from our mother and father, not just from the school we went to, but from generations that are passed on to us. The way we think, the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we behave, what is right, what is wrong within that family, within that village, within that culture. And what I love about Buddhist psychology, they don't talk about bad people and good people. They talk about the conditions and the causes of how you grew up. If you grow up in wartime, and you see violence every single day, then it's not a surprise if you become violent in order to fix a problem. So they teach how to become peace, not how to talk about peace.
How did that specific learning around Buddhist psychology give you perhaps a better insight into where you came from, you as Mary?
It changed my thinking completely. I think one of the huge changes that occurred in my life was changing the thinking, perception, and even suffering around family issues in which I grew up. My mother was a teacher, but married women were not allowed to teach in Ireland at her time. We were 9 children. She was dead set on education, but there was no such thing as free education in Ireland at that time beyond primary school. My father used to drink, and whether it was little or a lot, all my mother could see was, we need that money for education and food. So there was a lot of conflict around that. And we children, as often happens, we all intervened unconsciously to make life better, to make sure that my father and mother, that we would come in to help solve problems, not exactly take care of them, but try to keep things smooth. We would work harder, study harder. But that impacted me. And when I was doing Buddhist psychology, many years later, they talked about, how we come from all these generations. The Catholics thought we have the whole truth. That has changed very, very much. And it started changing when I came to Maryhill, because we had Catholics, Protestants, Hindus, Muslims, Ishmaelis, Seventh-day Adventists, and Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, how in the name of God can any teacher pretend in front of a class that somehow she has the direct path to God?
Right.
And so I stopped completely believing that there was a direct path to God, or that anybody had a hold on God, or had the first or last words to say. So my spirituality, my belief system changed.
I am almost tempted to continue down that line, but I would like just to take us, if we could go back a little bit more so that we can situate your present with a little bit of your past. I don't think I know why you came to Uganda. How did it come about?
When I was in secondary school in Ireland, they were a French order teaching in Ireland, and they had a lot of schools in Nigeria. And when I was in school, some of the nuns would be coming back from Africa and talking to us. And then some of our teachers would be sent out to Ghana, to Nigeria, and we would write to them, and we would get photographs, and the magazine, they emphasized music a lot, so we used to produce operettas every year. But so did the students in Nigeria, and we would get these photographs, and every time there was somebody going out, we had religious ceremony to bless them and sing songs and send them out, go feed all nations from, the gospel. So I had a very sort of close connection, if you like. And after college, after teaching for a year, I entered this congregation. And they had a school which they were just starting in Uganda at the request of Bishop Oshé of Emberara Diocese. And my training went on for 3 years in Ireland, 1 year in Belgium. And during that time, the superiors in Ireland were dialoguing with the ones in Uganda, and they knew that I was a home economics and clothing and textiles teacher. I was never told this, but they were all saying, as soon as she's ready, please send her out. So I was only told about that when I finished my formation. So I was sent out to Uganda. What I didn't like about it was the fact that we got no training in culture or language. I expected Ugandan girls to behave like we did in our school. And that was yes, sister, no, sister. From the king and I. Yes, sir, no, sir. Tell me how low to go, sir. And they were completely different. And I wasn't ready for it at all. We were brought up very religiously about the way we walked and displayed our body, if you like. So never anything of here. And never shaking your bones, and every Ugandan was shaking. When I first saw some of the dances, I was actually kind of embarrassed. I thought, my goodness, now I love them completely.
Yes.
But I must say, the people who educated me were the students. The Ugandan girls would absolutely, totally, stubbornly refused to do anything if they thought was unjust. And the head girls and the leaders of the choir or the leaders of the class were the ones who told me, if you do it like this or you do it like that, or you say this or you say that, it will work better. But it took a while for me to understand that it's not because I was a useless person or a useless teacher. And one day I said to the head girl, Victoria Kakoko, I just don't understand what's going on. She said, all the whites are like you when they come here. They don't understand us. We don't understand them. But don't worry, you'll settle down and it will change. This is my student teaching me culture. And that's how I learned. But it was painful.
Yeah. But you also came at like a turbulent period in Uganda's history.
It was just independence.
Yes.
And, I would be sending the Intari boys who had come to visit out the gate. We're a free country now. Yeah. And then one day I was parking. I was reverse parking. But as I was drawing up here, about to go in, another cheeky car came and went into my space. So I got out. I said, why did you do that? Why did you get into my space? Do people own parking spaces in Uganda now? Who does this white thing she is? So, yeah, it was a difficult learning. But then I learned so much. And then I asked the headmistress if I could go away to a language course, because the ethos was, if you are teaching here, you're teaching in English, you don't need the local language. And that's about the most stupid conclusion you can come to, that you spend a lifetime in a country, but you don't need to learn the language.
I had many teachers from
all of those
that never learned our language, that were all from the UK mainly, and they spent their lifetime here and they didn't. So exactly. you undertook a language course in what language?
In Ranyankoli. we had a very good teacher. He knew the language so well. He had written a dictionary. He knew the grammar perfectly. I absolutely loved the course. I was with young priests, and they were doing 6 months. After about 6 weeks, the headmistress called me. That's enough now, you have to come back to work. Mm. And I've resented this all my life. I mean, I could have continued privately, but the chance, the opportunity to study it, to learn it, to learn the structure, the vocabulary, that should have been automatic.
Yeah, and language doesn't sit alone, because just like our earlier conversation, the language comes with other things. A language comes with a better cultural understanding.
Absolutely.
A language comes with a sense of place.
Everything. The language talks. And then the proverbs.
Yeah.
And the whole way. I used to get crazy when the girls would say, the machine refused. How did the machine refuse? Could you not start with I broke the machine? Mm. The machine refused. The car died. And then when you learn the language, that's exactly, what is being said. And then when I studied psychology and started reading African philosophy and culture and traditional religion, I kind of understood it enough to be able to teach it and to get students to always look at how the client explains the problem and to go along with that. If there are rituals they have to do with their ancestors, join them in those rituals.
I understand from having talked to our friend Rugendo that you also were involved in some sort of charitable work. Was that after Maryhill? Was it after your studies in the United States?
It was during, when I was in Maryhill, Amin came into power. As you know, he started a campaign against highly educated or rich Ugandans, and the Asians were expelled. The Uganda shilling, we used to get 20 shillings for a pound. Now, the Uganda shilling was 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings. So this for £1. We couldn't get sugar or soap in the shops. We had to get certificates from the ministry and then go to a big government store and get sugar and soap and salt for the school. In order to get medications now, you had to get these certificates, go into government schools. So we were told, don't go on a Friday, they won't be there. Don't go on a Monday, they probably aren't yet back to work. Try to get on a Wednesday in the middle of the day, maybe around 11:30. You might get the people in the office. So Dr. Ian Clark wrote a book which is very funny. The Man with the Key is Gone. You go to Kampala, you had your paper allowing you to collect so many bags of sugar, salt, and soap. And you'd arrive at the store, poke around what's going on. Well, the man with the key is gone. Every one of us heard it. Mm-hmm. So you had to try and logically figure out what hour of what day in the week could you get the man with the key. Mm-hmm. So one day I was teaching home economics, and I think the girl turned on the gas before she lit the match, and I yelled at her, and she started crying. Then I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry. She said, you didn't make me cry. But she said, I have no soap, and my parents can't pay the fees, and I'd probably be going home. And I'd go into a class, my class, I was the head teacher in that class. Where's so-and-so? she's gone. Where's she gone? I don't know. I go down to the office. Where is such a girl? She's gone. What happened? She dropped out of school. She can't pay the school fees. And it was really impacting us. And the teachers' pay was so low that they wanted to get other jobs. So science teacher, teaching in Maryhill, teaching in Ontario, teaching somewhere else. So you would wonder, what day are they going to be with you? What days are they going to miss? And how can we keep them in school? And when I went home for the holidays, a priest friend of mine in London, a parish priest, took me out to a very exotic restaurant in London. And I said, oh my God. I said, the cost of this meal is horrendous. It would pay for a month's tuition. And he said, Mary, if you stop talking about the price of the meal, I'll give you a check for the amount to match. So if we eat for £100, I give you £100. And then I told him what was happening, and he said, you need to tell this. Come to my parish and you can speak at the masses. And we were given 7 minutes. So I started looking for money to pay to keep girls in school. And that was the only thing, just keep our girls in our school.
Yes.
But then people in the village heard about it. And sometimes they'd turn up at the convent with a baby and say, can you take my child? Or can you do this? And it kind of grew by itself, people wanting help with school fees. So then, it went from that to getting organizations to give us some money. The Christian Children's Fund of America had offices in Kampala. So somebody advised me to go to them. We went to them and they started giving us money. And then when a certain German family came out to visit their brother, a priest, they also heard about it. And the hotel that we were staying in Queen Elizabeth National Park, they met a girl who worked in the hotel, who used to work in our convent. And that German couple said he would sponsor this baby's education. Now he happened to be the director of a bank in Germany. So whenever a rich German would come in to invest and discuss how to invest money, he would give him very good financial advice and then say, what about investing in the education of a child? He actually took over the German heart. He knew every child, every sponsor, everything. He was incredible. And for 20 years, he got sponsorship for us. Then we had sponsors from England, Ireland, Canada, and the States. Individual sponsors for individual children.
Is that still ongoing, or
it is?
It did come to an end at some point?
It didn't come to an end, but it hasn't continued. First of all, he retired. So he didn't have this connection. We didn't have a connection. The man who took over works in a wood factory, but he's dealing with supplies of wood for furniture and things. He doesn't meet people, and he's not in a position to ask them, can you invest? And so he's never managed to get a child. We had a German organization, and they still give us money. We still get sponsors from England and Ireland, but the accountant in the north of Ireland and the accountant in the south of Ireland, who deal with the charity divisions of those countries which give us tax back, they're both of retirement age. They're waiting for me to go home now and get new people. I don't know young people. I can't ask old people. So we're running into a lot of blocks.
Was there ever thinking around raising funds here? One of the things CivSource is interested in is cultures of giving, which already sort of exist within that broader family network that we spoke of. But as the middle class sort of grows, a few people have a little more disposable income, that there are opportunities for philanthropy internally. So has that ever been a consideration?
Yeah, we have 3 projects. We have a counsellor training institute, but within that we have an external project where trained counsellors and psychosocial participatory methodology using it go out into the field and they work with families.
Pro bono?
The families don't pay, but we give them money for transport. A lunch is provided and the team of 4 sleeps out in the district where they're training. We've been to Karamoja, we've been to Lira, we've been to Rubindi, we're now in Isinjiro, we've been to Kabale. And they work with families where there's a lot of conflict, sometimes too much drinking, not necessarily alcoholism, but too much money being spent on drink, sometimes adultery, women doing too much work and not having ownership of property or resources. And we spend 1 month with them, 2 weeks and 2 weeks, and then they form groups. We don't teach. We have questions that we ask them to discuss in groups, exploring their unhappiness, basically. And they first start with poverty, but then we say, well, let's leave the poverty out for a moment. And then explore, what do you do with your resources? And what else happens? So it's a very, very, very good program because they go back to what their dreams were. And then they have to explore, how did we end up trying to kill one another, and hating one another and beating our children and children dropping. How did we arrive here? And there's this self-exploration. And then we go into the culture and we ask a lot of questions. We ask the men to get together and give us every single task they do from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed. And then we ask the women. The women's list starts and goes right down. And sex is one of the duties. And then the men are complaining they want good sex, clean bed, as often as they want it. But then you look and they've got all this leisure time. They don't help with the children. They don't help with this. They don't help with that. So we look at that. You're making choices that are making you suffer. And, what are you going to do about it? So they make themselves a plan of action. And they form groups within their villages to meet every so often so we can remind ourselves, because we know what's going on in your family. We know what's going on in my family. And we do another training with teachers on child-centered education, liberation psychology, and non-violence.
What is liberation psychology?
Liberation education, I meant. Liberation education came out of Brazil. An educational philosopher, Paulo Freire, started saying that our present system of education is a colonization of the mind. if I ask you what that is, this is a phone. What is that? You repeat back exactly what I've told you. If you repeat back 100% of what I've told you, you get 100 marks.
Yes.
So we teach liberation education, liberation philosophy, liberation psychology. You just asked about it. Liberation psychology says, look at the system that has created this and put the pathology where it belongs. If you're living in a system where the government has total power, has power to kill you, imprison you, you can't speak openly, you can't say what you think, and you can't object, or you can't do this, or you can't do that, then you're going to react normally to an oppressive government. And there's such a thing as decolonial mental health. Stop diagnosing with an American diagnostic manual. Look at the system that is causing you to suffer. During the time when the Bakonjo and I think the Batoro, I don't know who the Bakonjo, who was fighting whom, some children got kidnapped. And one girl of 13 was found on the mountains and taken down to a hospital, I think Kagando Hospital up near the Ruwenzori. And one of our trainee counsellors happened to be there. And when he was talking about what he did, he said she wasn't behaving normally. And I said, so how is she behaving? Well, she couldn't talk. She was just blah, 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 blah. And then other things. I said, well, if you spent a few nights on the mountain alone as a young girl, how do you think you behave? So she's not abnormal. She's behaving normally to a very abnormal situation. So liberation psychology looks into that, centralizing and contextualizing the person and not pathologizing the person. And in liberation education, we're teaching it's not that you know everything and the children know nothing, and you're going to pour this stuff into them like petrol into an empty tank.
Yes.
And then you think they're full. But create a dialogue, ask questions, find out their problems, stop abusing them, stop beating them when they come late with a dirty uniform.
What's the reception here in Uganda? Because I grew up in a system, and you taught in a system that is just that, petrol in a can. Is there any receptiveness to it?
There's no resistance whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
I mean, your mind automatically goes back to how you're treating your children at home. It's the same. If they don't do what you say, you beat them. There's no dialogue. Why did you do that? Beating a child for coming in with a dirty uniform, not knowing the child has been carrying firewood and carrying water, doesn't have soap, and is running late, anxious, and now she gets beaten again. And we talk about the learning mind or the learning brain and the surviving brain and the surviving mind. If I'm afraid of being beaten or punished or told, you're going to fail, then I go into my surviving mind. If I'm in a safe space and I can breathe normally, and my teacher knows my name and says, what do you think about this? The child's mind goes into a learning mode and they can absorb far, far more.
For the purpose of this podcast, it's built around a core question of what we leave behind. That's why it's called Footprints. You have done a lot, achieved a lot. There's still more work to do. After all these years, what would you say of some of what you have done? What has lasted and what will last? And perhaps what hasn't turned out to be as durable as you first thought it was?
Okay, I've been very influenced by what the Buddhists say, that what we leave behind are our words, our thoughts, and our actions. Now, when I look back to how I was when I came to Maryhill first, I thought, oh my God, I hurt them and made them suffer. But they invited me back to a past students' union about a year or two ago in Maryhill. And so when I went down, my God, they nearly swarmed me. And they said such beautiful things. And I kind of forgave myself, if you like, with their blessing, because they never spoke about the things I did that hurt them, but about the things I taught them, that they passed on and they kept for their children and things like that. Kind of that goodness that has been passed on to me is being passed on to other generations. And then what I think I have received, what footprints, what marks have been left on me by coming here. People say, you must be doing so much good. I don't come out because I'm doing good. I come out because good is being done to me. I hope that the footprint I leave will be one of respect for the planet and love for others, not for their sake, but for my own growth. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Is there anything that any last thought or word that you would have to say before we bring this to an end? Something maybe that you've been mulling on before we close this?
I think maybe to thank Rugendo he's always been very appreciative of the fact that he got his first sponsorship in St. Francis. And he kept on. He invited me to his PhD graduation. And he introduced me to everyone as his sponsor. The actual sponsor was a German woman. But one of my teachers in the States said, remember, when people glorify you or thank you, that's their need, so accept their need. They want to say thank you, they want to say their appreciation, even if you're not the one who did this, that, or the other, but you're the receiver of what they need to give, and just accept it. So I thank Rugendo for what he said and what he honored, and I'm kind of a spokesperson for centuries of good training, and I love to sort of pass it on. And then thank you for taking the time, and I'm really always available to give any direction or leads back to the sources that fed me. So you go for clean water.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for sitting with me, Mary. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being a part of Footprints podcast today. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.